Welcome to the Real Clear Politics Takeaway for Friday, December 10th. I'm Andrew Walworth. Well, in case you haven't heard, the actor Jussie Smollett was convicted on Thursday night of lying to police about a hate crime that he says happened on the streets of Chicago. His story, always far-fetched, was nonetheless repeated and supported by some politicians in the press. And now that he's been convicted, will there be any rethinking about how to cover racially charged crimes? Also this week, Joe Biden convened a summit for the world's democracies, although some question how the guest list was assembled and whether the U.S. should even try to support democratic ideals at all. And new polls reveal that Hispanics are moving towards the political center, which may mean headaches ahead for the Democratic Party. Joining me to talk about all this are Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics, Carl Cannon, Washington bureau chief, and Phil Wegmann, White House correspondent. So, Tom, let's start with you. You're out there in Chicago. Jussie Smollett was convicted on 5 of 6 counts of lying to police. It was a pretty bad day for the actor, but also a bad day for a lot of prominent people who believed his story. Is there going to be any reckoning for Team Jussie on this one?
Of course not. There's no such thing as reckonings these days, especially for things like this. I mean, if you remember when this happened in, what was it, 2018, I guess? Or was it 2019?
It's 2019.
January 2019. You know, there was this outcry from all of these prominent Hollywood elites and politicians, including Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, whose tweets are still up, by the way, but many, many others talking about what, you know, the hate in this country, it has to be battled. And this is just such a dark day in American history, yada, yada, yada. Turns out he made it all up. Most people recognized that he made it up pretty darn quick. I mean, the details of the case never made sense right from the beginning. You know, Dave Chappelle said it best, you know, go watch his 5-minute clip.
He said that remember, he said that certain gay activists had criticized certain African-American activists, saying that you weren't be supportive of Jussie Smollett, as he called him. He said,
the French actor,
well-known French actor. He said, but what they didn't understand is that we were being supportive of him. We were supporting him by his silence because we knew he was clearly lying.
Yeah. So, I mean, but, you know, this case immediately just took some weird turns. You had, you know, Kim Foxx, who's the very progressive prosecutor here in Cook County, who, you know, looked into this, declined to prosecute him. Then she had to recuse herself, you know, theoretically recuse herself. She appointed her like, you know, first lieutenant and was being apprised of the case. She had been in contact with Tina Chen, who's connected to Michelle Obama, who's friends with Jussie Smollett. I mean, it's been this odyssey that has gone back and forth and back and forth. And obviously, look, for all of those, as I tweeted last night, for all of those who wanted justice for Jussie, he got justice last night. He was found guilty on 5 of 6 counts of lying to police repeatedly about what happened. Clearly, the jury did not buy his case, just like a lot of Americans did not buy his case. And I don't think there will be any reckoning. In fact, I just saw a note here that MSNBC's entire primetime lineup did not mention the case once last night. I mean, just think about that. Not once. So no, there's not going to be any reckoning. There's not going to be any rethinking. It's one of the unfortunate features of our society is people like Jussie Smollett think they can gain fame by portraying themselves as victims of hate crimes. And it's unfortunate. It happens very often. And there doesn't ever seem to be any sort of course correction or introspection after it happens.
Well, Phil, I do have to read because Tom mentioned them and because they are still up. These are the tweets that people are talking about. This was Kamala Harris, January 2019. Jussie Smollett is one of the kindest, most gentle human beings I know. I'm praying for his quick recovery. This was an attempted modern-day lynching. No one should have to fear for their life because of their sexuality or color of their skin. We must confront this hate. This was Biden, same time. This was within hours or days of the alleged attack. What happened today to Jussie Smollett must never be tolerated in this country. We must stand up and demand that we no longer give this hate safe harbor. Homophobia and racism have no place on our streets and our hearts. We are with you, Jussie. So, Phil, The White House, what are they saying about this now? These tweets are still up. Is there any reaction at all? Do you anticipate any reaction?
They're definitely going to get a question, and Jen Psaki is definitely going to be pushed today on why President Biden said what he said when he was a candidate. And I'm not certain what she's going to say, but we all know why Biden did this. We all know why every 2020 Democrat, with the sole exception of Pete Buttigieg, rushed to the defense of this fellow. And it's obvious because this was not necessarily just a case about one guy allegedly getting beaten up in Chicago. This was sort of a proxy case for how all of Donald Trump's supporters were racist and how they didn't just harbor bigoted thoughts, they were also dangerous. And you had a lot of people who jumped onto this really quickly, despite how fantastical the story was. This could have been a turning point. I remember talking to David Axelrod in 2019, and he was like, hey, the details here are so egregious that, yeah, politicians with platforms, like, they want to condemn it. They want to support people who have been downtrodden. But this shows the risks of weighing in too early before all the facts are known. And you would think 2019 was a sort of reset moment. No one learned any lessons from this then. And we'll see if anyone actually does now.
Well, Carl, Jussie's lawyers say they're going to appeal, or at least that's their story right now. So there may be another bite to this thing. But Clay Travis, he's a pretty outspoken commentator. He said something which I thought was interesting. He said, the demand for racist hate far exceed the supply of any racist hate incidents. Because of this, we are seeing one racial hoax charade after another. I mean, is that the other problem here? And that these sorts of hoaxes make it more difficult for reporting on real racial incidents, which, let's face it, they do happen.
Well, I don't know how often they happen. And there was a case in Chicago, Tom knows about it, a real hate crime that ended in the death of an elderly Asian man. A black motorist drove by, shot the guy.
Broad daylight, execute 20 bullets, pumped 20 bullets into him.
The only conceivable motive would be racial hate. This defendant is going to probably turn out to have mental problems. It's not a healthy thing to shoot people because they're walking down the street. He's probably going to have a record. He's probably going to be on parole. We've seen this. But I'm not sure I completely agree with Phil and Tom. There's going to be a tipping point at some point. And the Jussie Smollett case may be the tipping point. This was a case that was obviously, if you'd ever covered police or anything, I mean, this thing didn't sound right from the beginning. There were so many things wrong with the narrative. It seemed laughable. There was a hate crime committed. I've said this before. Jussie Smollett committed it. And this had such political implications. So, we've had many of these hoaxes, too many to mention, but famous ones. The Charlottesville case, the Duke lacrosse case, where troubled people concocted a story. They wanted young men to go to prison. I mean, really ugly things. But this had an overtly political angle to it. The MAGA hat. This was an elitist Democrat, very successful actor, a millionaire, I assume, but certainly a person of wealth, who accused, basically, as Phil pointed out, the whole Trump nation of this horrid crime. And he did it. We don't know why he did it exactly, but there's some...
Well, he's a psychopath.
Well, there's some evidence that he was trying to pressure the producers of Empire to pay him more than, I guess he was getting $36,000 an episode. He apparently concocted a couple of racist letters that he'd sent to those producers. They hadn't reacted. So he came up with this scheme, and he's not even a good liar. He's not even a good actor. I guess that's what would hurt him the most. He's on the stand jousting with this prosecutor. And to me, in this buffoonish behavior of his lawyers before, during, and after the trial notwithstanding, you got a trial judge here who, these are class 4 felonies. If Jussie Smollett had apologized once he was caught, he wouldn't have done a day in jail. He'd have done little community service. And the prosecutor used this phrase in his closing argument. And he said he insulted the intelligence of this jury. Well, he insulted the intelligence of Americans, and he perjured himself on the stand. He may go to jail for this. And you would hope, and Tom thinks I'm naive, hopelessly naive, that the next time something like this happens, the media, these Hollywood types who beclown themselves, and the politicians and the press would take a deep breath and say, well, hold on a minute.
Carl, to your point, this case was so obviously false from the beginning. It only took about 2 seconds of scrutiny before you could sense that things didn't add up. If they can't even contain themselves and see that, how do you expect them to see anything in the future?
Okay, I'll take that bait. I know I'm gonna look bad here, but because if you're a principled progressive who cares about racial justice, and I think most of them do, and they said to themselves at the time, they said to us, they said to the public, well, why would a guy make up a story like this? How could this possibly be? And that goes to what Andy and Phil were saying, because there's a market for it, and the market is fueled by these tweets and this stuff. And so I think thoughtful people, look, Don Lemon of CNN, who considers himself a friend of Jussie Smollett, covered this case on their network honestly last night. A person like that is going to say, all right, what did I do to further the market for this?
Other than tipping off Jussie about the police probe, meddling in an investigation.
Look,
other than that,
no, I don't see it that way. But he my point is he covered it on the air honestly, and he's not an unintelligent guy. Don Lemon's got to be thinking, all right, what was my role in this? Well, the role in it was to suspend what's called in the church willful suspension of disbelief. The facts were so absurd. Okay, to take a step back, let's evaluate. Did this happen? Could this have happened? And again, there have been so many of these. Maybe that we may have reached a turning point.
Well, Phil, I want to talk about this Democratic summit. President Biden convened it. It was a virtual summit of democracies. It was Thursday and Friday. More than 100 countries attended. China and Russia were excluded. Pakistan, the Philippines were included. Hungary and Turkey were not. So it was sort of an idiosyncratic list of countries that were invited. But, Biden does have a history of being supportive of the idea of exporting democracy or promoting democracy. And so this is something he talked about doing before his election. Is this good politics at this point? Do you think this is going to make any difference?
I mean, we'll see if swing voters are moved in any way by the president holding a summit on democracy. I think that, yesterday I was there. There were, I think over 80 nations that were included. And the most interesting thing were the notable exceptions. Biden talked about how there needed to be more support for women in government. And that comes as there's increased persecution of women in Afghanistan after our withdrawal. He talked about the importance of human rights. Same backdrop in Afghanistan. There's not much of a defense for human rights there at the moment. And then also it comes at a moment where a lot of people are questioning his administration's commitment to actually doing something rather than just having these glorified press opportunities. The thing that was interesting about all of this, though, is that while Biden was coming together to talk about democracy versus autocracy with all of these different nations across the world, clearly the undercurrent was that Democrats and folks on the left think that there's a danger of an authoritarian moment in this country, and that the last 4 years of Trump were very dangerous to representative government here. So yeah, it was interesting from what we got to see of it yesterday, but nothing that would surprise you other than generally happy diplomatic talk.
Tom, this has always been a sort of a criticism of these sort of attempts to support democracy, that once we start to do it, someone points out, we're not perfect. Who are we to tell the world what to do? We should stick to our own knitting. I mean, do you buy that? Do you think that this is a sort of mistake, or is it on the margin sort of helpful?
No, I think it's helpful. I mean, I think we should do it. Now, there's a difference between promoting democracy and invading other countries and trying to impose it on them. So let's make that distinction, right? I think it's helpful to try.
It worked for Japan, Tom.
But I think it's helpful and healthy. It is a core value of this country, and we should, I think, speak out on behalf of burgeoning democracies. Look, where I have the issue is with the folks who say that, as Biden said, as Barack Obama said yesterday, everybody sort of, running down American democracy, and it's, there's this, to Phil's point, it's we're backsliding. It's an authoritarian moment. It's a crisis. And because of all of these things, gerrymandering being one, which just absolutely, sticks in my craw, because there's a story, just to give you one example, Obama was talking about all the gerrymandering in all these places, and the map in Texas is to trying to take away the vote from people of color. That's what it's designed to do. And the Justice Department's suing them, and Mark Elias is suing all these Republican states. If you saw the map the Illinois Democrats have passed, there's a district that runs from the south side of Chicago out, over, up, and back. I mean, it's insane. Democrats are doing this in Maryland. They're doing it in New Mexico. So this idea that somehow this gerrymandering is a threat to democracy when Republicans do it, but when Democrats do it, it's fine. You have a story today that Democrats in New York, non-citizens are able to vote in local elections there for the first time. So this idea, this is
democracy, Tom.
Yes,
we're democracy. Supposed to be talking about democracy.
Yeah, right. Exactly. No, Republicans are the ones that are dismantling our democracy. Meanwhile, Democrats are doing many of the same things and in some ways busting other norms, however you want to look at it. So I take umbrage to this one-sided notion that somehow our democracy is in peril and it's Republicans' fault. I think our democracy is fine. And I do think we should continue to talk about it and promote it but again, without invading other countries. That's the only caveat. It's a big one, and we don't seem to be very good at keeping to that rule, but I would like us to.
Carl, what do you think?
I think that Tom's discursive diversion into gerrymandering notwithstanding, I think that, Tom, I hated gerrymandering when you were in college, so we could do a show on it. But let's get back to Joe Biden for a minute. I'm proud of what he was doing as president. That's what you want your president to do, and I think that, and Tom and I do agree on that. But there's something else. I saw that as sort of a subtle rebuke to what Tom's talking about, this fetish on the left now that democracy's in trouble in America because of because of Trump, the real answer. But that's the hysteria du jour, and I don't share that fear. I think democracy is always messy. It's always tough. We do it better than anybody else, and it's nice to have a president stand up. The context isn't gerrymandering. The context for this summit is China going around the world saying that their response to COVID-19 shows that authoritarianism is a superior system to democracy, which is, if there was an international all-time chutzpah award, this would be it. China, the virus comes out of China. They lie about it from the very beginning, are still lying about it. They lie about everything from where it came from to their death tolls to who caused it. And they locked down their citizens. You couldn't travel from Wuhan to Beijing because it's a totalitarian country, but you could go from Wuhan to Seattle or San Francisco or Los Angeles or Rome or England. To me, the moral of the COVID story, if you want to talk about it, is that the world is too small to have any totalitarian countries in it. Now, circling back to Tom's point, that's the conclusion people like Condoleezza Rice and Dick Cheney and George W. Bush came to after 9/11. And that can lead you down a road that you don't necessarily want to go, which is you're supposed to go around the world imposing democracy by force. That's not what Biden was talking about. He's talking about you're supposed to impose it by example, and you're supposed to encourage it. And with democracy comes freedom of speech, human rights, and all the values that we care about as Americans.
Well, Phil, related to this was you wrote this great piece this week, which I really commend to people if you get a chance, because it's about the Uyghurs in China and the tension within the administration between defending the Uyghurs, the human rights for the Uyghurs, which is a Muslim minority in China, and the desire to import solar panels from China, which are made in the province where these Uyghurs are being held in camps. What's the tension, and how does the White House going to square this?
So far, they've squared it by running away from the issue entirely. It is interesting that one of the rare bipartisan issues in Washington, D.C. for the last 2 years or so is that China is being bad to the Uyghur people. They are perpetrating a genocide against them, and that responsible entities should oppose them. The previous administration designated the Chinese treatment of this Muslim population as genocide. The Biden administration kept that designation. And so now the question is, what are we going to do about it? There were two bills, one in the House by a Democratic representative named James McGovern, another in the Senate by Republican Senator Marco Rubio. And basically what they would do is they would reinforce laws that we currently have on the books going back to the 1930s, which is that the federal government doesn't want to see us import any goods that were made with slave labor. As things are right now, though, it's becoming increasingly difficult to make certain that a number of different goods that we import from China aren't made with that forced labor. And so this would sort of put some teeth into the current restrictions. And in particular, it would target any goods that were coming out of the Xinjiang province. As you mentioned, that's where there's a lot of solar panel production. And China has done to solar production what they did to steel. They made it a priority to sort of bolster their own industry. And in that way, they sort of throttled, solar in the United States, in Japan, in Germany, and elsewhere. And so they have a big chunk of the market. Rubio and McGovern come along and say, hey, we shouldn't be importing anything with slave labor. Everyone seems to agree. But for whatever reason, for the last year, these bills that passed the House and the Senate previously were slowed. And there were allegations that the administration was the one who was slowing them down. From our reporting, what I can say definitively is that the State Department denies that they're lobbying against these bills. The White House denies that they're lobbying against these bills. John Kerry denies that he is lobbying against these bills. But the issue is you have an administration who wants to talk about being tough on human rights, and you have an administration that also wants to see progress on climate. And John Kerry is negotiating with the Chinese, asking them to do more about their climate emissions. And the Chinese are saying, you're telling us to reduce our climate emissions at a moment when you're, trying to sanction export of our solar panels. And so this is this entire diplomatic mess has basically led to the White House washing their hands of the entire debate, and the president not weighing in and not actually taking a definitive stance on what is, what he has admitted is very real genocide.
So, Carl, this sounds like just the latest version of a classic question when it comes to human rights, which is, where does it stand in our list of diplomatic priorities? 45% of the world's supply of polysilicon, which is the key component for solar panels, comes out of this province. And meanwhile, there are 12 million Uyghurs there, many of whom are in labor camps and are in forced labor situations, slave labor situations. John Kerry says human rights is not my lane, which is kind of an interesting thing for a former Secretary of State to say.
Wait. It was an appalling statement.
I was going to say real profile and courage there.
Yeah, no, it's like it's like
JFK.
It reminded me, this is the time of year, very much of Ebenezer Scrooge saying to Marley's ghost, but you were a good man of business, Jacob. Of course, Marley says, mankind was my business. Common welfare was my business. What you'd like to see is an American government that could walk and chew gum at the same time, Andy. So global warming is an issue. All right. We need solar panels. Fine. We'll make them here, or we'll raise the price of them. But we're not going to contribute to these horrific abuses against a racial minority in China, forced sterilizations, forced labor camps, killings, imprisonments. It's horrifying what's going on. It should shock the conscience of any person in the world. And the idea that we have to buy a product that they make there, so we're going to be quiet about it. John Kerry should be ashamed of himself for saying that.
Tom, strong letter to follow here.
I wish, look, it is not, and we have the diplomatic boycott of the Olympics, the Winter Olympics. We're still sending our athletes, but as bad as the Uyghur situation is, China's a bad actor on COVID, on how they've cracked down on Hong Kong, on how they're threatening Taiwan. They have been very aggressive across the board on the way they still, to this day, steal intellectual property. They haven't played by the rules of the road, and we've let them get away with it. I think Trump's changed our stance, and it is a popular policy with the American public. I think the American public would be in favor of decoupling from China. And to Carl's point, why can't we initiate a Made in America program and throw some of this money that was trillions of dollars to build solar panels here. I mean, we have production capabilities. That's just one example, but I think by and large, China in general they've been a bad actor on the world stage for a long time. The only people who seem to not want to hold them accountable and confront them are CEOs of large, massive corporations and, LeBron James. So obviously the Uyghur situation is bad, and we should highlight that, but we shouldn't just focus on that. China has plenty of other areas where they've been misbehaving, and we should engage with them across the board on their bad behavior.
Carl, let's switch to back home for a second here. I want to talk about the recent polling out of the Wall Street Journal and other places about Hispanic voters. Most recent Wall Street Journal poll, Hispanic voters were split evenly between Democrats and Republicans in the 2022 generic congressional ballot. In 2024, hypothetical rematch between Trump and Biden. These voters favored Biden by only a single point. This is Hispanics. They were the group that favored Biden over Trump in 2020 by 26 points overall. So this is a real sea change, it seems, and perhaps a threat to sort of the Democratic coalition. How do the Democrats view this, and how do you view it?
Well, if you take the long term, Hispanic voters have respond to a person at the top of the ticket who speaks their language and I don't mean literally speak Spanish, although George W. Bush did, and it helped him, but who's attentive to the concerns of immigrants. And, Ronald Reagan did well with Hispanics in California. Bush did even better in Texas. I think he got a majority of the vote there when he ran for governor and up to 40% when he ran for president. So this is not a shocking turn. In this case, though, and I'd be curious what Tom thinks about this. I don't think it has much to do with Donald Trump. I think it has to do with the Democrats veering towards an identity politics way of looking at race. When my first book came out, I think 18 years ago now, and it was called The Pursuit of Happiness in Times of War. And it was about how presidents speak to Americans in times of national crisis. And I got into the idea of American exceptionalism, and two cohorts of Americans always get that, and they don't make apologies for it. United States presidents, Barack Obama included, and immigrants. They come here because they like this country. They come here for all kinds of reasons, religious freedom, economic opportunity, but they like America. And this sort of apologizing for America strain that's going through, again, from the elite, so in the academia, I think it's hurting the Democratic brand with immigrants and first generation Americans and Hispanics in particular.
Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, look, there was a lot made about Donald Trump, and Democrats demonized him, obviously, from the get-go, right? When he
wait, Tom, he demonized himself in his opening statement.
When he announced for president.
Carl. Okay, all right.
So he makes this derogatory statement about Mexicans crossing the border.
He called them rapists, Tom.
He said they're not sending us their best. They're sending us rapists and drug dealers, and not their best people. Is exactly what he said, Carl. And there was this picture of him, remember, on Cinco de Mayo, where he had the taco bowl. He was a caricature, right? Easily demonized. And again, he made this crack about this judge of Mexican descent. I mean, the guy was an American. I mean, so, lo and behold, though, after 4 years of being in office and talking tough about the border and, putting up a border wall, talking tough about illegal immigration and doing something about illegal immigration, and also producing an economy that lifted all boats, including Hispanics, right? Wage gains, et cetera, et cetera. Donald Trump did better. I mean, he flipped counties in South Texas that hadn't voted Republican since Reconstruction. Okay. He did very well among Latinos, which was a shock to Democrats. So I think they care. And when I interviewed him at Mar-a-Lago a couple of months ago, he said, listen, the Hispanics, he's like, they know I love them. They get it. When I talk about, they're on the front lines of this illegal immigration. These folks are coming across, taking their jobs, bringing whatever crime and disease into their communities. They get it. And I think there's some truth to that. So that's, but to the point that Carl made, and I think this is also an important point, is that Democrats have lost touch with them. There was another poll, and I think you have it, and you can read the details of it. That came out earlier from Fernando Armandi, who's like it's
Sergio Bendixen's group.
Sergio Bendixen's group, right?
Yeah.
This is a Democratic consulting firm. But
Democratic polling firm,
yeah.
Exactly. Talking about Latinx, that only 2% of Hispanics identify themselves as Latinx or Latinx. And most of them find it offensive. And so that's the other side of the coin, which is while Trump and his policies have been making progress with Hispanics in Texas and Florida and other places, Cuban Americans obviously voted overwhelmingly for Trump. You have Democrats who have completely lost touch with them and are pursuing these, trying to pursue these identity politics. And they're not only are they not gaining traction, they're losing traction, they're losing connection. And unless and until they get back in touch, then they're going to be in trouble. And to put this in perspective, though, I mean, this could be a catastrophic moment for the Democratic Party. If they don't win 90+% of the African American vote and 2/3 of the Hispanic vote, they're going to be in real trouble. I mean, if what the polling, Wall Street Journal polls said, if that actually happened today or next November, and Hispanics split evenly, 47-47 or whatever the number was among Democrats and Republican candidates across this country, Democrats are going to get wiped out. I mean, wiped out. It's going to be a complete bloodbath. So this is an existential sort of, fire alarm moment for the Democrats, which, we have Roy Teixeira leading Real Clear Politics this morning talking about what a problem it is and how the Democrats have to deal with it immediately.
So, Phil, two things. One, in Virginia, Terry McAuliffe actually lost the Latino vote, which I thought was interesting. He lost ground among blacks and other races as well, but he actually lost the Latino vote. But on this topic of Latinx or Latinx, is the real audience for that, though, not Hispanics, but woke Democratic voters? And isn't that the problem here, is that you may be doing something as a Democrat that 3 out of 10 Latinos, according to this poll, are less likely to vote for you if you use the term Latinx. They actually find it a turnoff. And yet probably 100% of the woke vote out there wants you to use it. So you're stuck between this sort of woke vote and the Latin vote, which you really need as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because you would think that for all of his over-the-top language that Donald Trump would be the big loser here, but it turns out that maybe some of this woke ideology is more of a turnoff for these voters than the polite terms. I think that if you look at Virginia as a rubric, there are a lot of social conservatives out there who are saying this shows that Hispanic voters, they by their nature are more conservative. They have more in common with conservative Republican values than they do with liberal woke ones. And so it's time to lean in on pro-family policy. And certainly there's groups like Terry Schilling's and the American Principle Project who are trying to make that argument to Republicans right now. But I think the takeaway from the polling that we've seen in the Wall Street Journal and then also what we saw in Virginia is that the old attacks where you just said that Republicans were racist because they were interested in border security or, that they were racist because they supported Donald Trump, that just isn't going to work. It's not a magic bullet for Democrats anymore. And like Tom said, unless something changes in voter sentiment between now and 2022 or 2024, Democrats are going to have some very bad days.
Well, Carl, last word.
Andy, you mentioned Virginia on the Republican ticket. The racist party, you had a black woman immigrant lieutenant governor elected, and the first Hispanic attorney general, Jason Miyares, who's of Cuban descent. And he said, to the point that Andy, you and Phil and Tom were talking about, he said it directly. By insisting on using the incorrect term Latinx, progressives are engaging in a type of cultural Marxism, a recast of societal norms. Latinos don't use the term. Only upper-educated white liberals who hardly interact with the Latino community use the term. I believe that every time they use the term Latinx, they lose another Latino vote. So he made it a direct correlation. Having said that, the Democrats, and Fernando Mondi and Sergio Bendixen there's a path for Democrats with Hispanic votes, and it's to get off of this woke stuff and stick to the economic issues. Because look, Phil's right. Some of the social issues poll well with Latinos, but so does universal health care. So does single payer health care, in point of fact. So there are economic issues for the Democrats, and they need to get back to those issues and appeal to working class voters of all races.
Well, I was going to wrap it up, but our listeners can't see Tom, but Tom is chomping, physically chomping at the microphone. No,
I was just going to say it's such a no-brainer, right? That someone needs to stand up and just tell the woke left to sit down and shut up. What are they going? We're not using Latinx. That is dumb. It's offending our voters, and we're not using it anymore. And what are those voters going to do? They're going to vote Republican? Of course not. They're going to vote Democrat. So we talked about a tipping point earlier. And you had James Carville who said, listen, we got to, Democrats, we got to stop this woke stuff and whatever. There's going to be a tipping point. I think it's coming very soon where someone is going to have to stand up. Maybe it's Joe Biden. Maybe this is how he rights his ship, is he gives a, Sister Souljah's speech or something where he makes an effort to tell the woke left to sit down in the corner and be quiet while he reconnects the Democratic Party to Carl's point, working class voters of all races, creeds, colors, sizes, shapes. That's what they need. But as of yet, there's nobody who's made that, stood up and taken that stand against the left. So we'll see. Except for you, Tom. You just did it. So except for me. I'll give the speech. I'll write it for him. All right, good. See if the White House calls you on that. I think that's an offer. No, we don't write speeches for politicians. Let's quit joking around. All right. Well, we're going to have to wrap it up this week. I want to thank Tom Bevan, Carl Cannon, Phil Wegmann. We're usually here Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays in some form or fashion. So bookmark this podcast. Check back often. As ever, I encourage you to go to Real Clear Politics, read one article from a writer or publication with whom you disagree, and join us next week. We're going to be looking at a new Real Clear poll on attitudes toward work during COVID. John Della Volpe will be joining us. And we're going to end the year with 2 shows wrapping up 2021 and looking forward to the year ahead. So bookmark this podcast so you don't miss those or any of our other programs. And thank you for listening. Until next time, for Real Clear Politics, I'm Andrew Walworth.